Welcome to my exhibition Materia Medica here at the Uzbekistan Museum of Contemporary Art in Urgench in Uzbekistan. So my project here is supported by the British Council's Connections Through Culture programme, which enables British artists to make connections with artists, arts and cultural institutions in other countries. And the project I developed with Shirin Tashova, who's the director of this museum, is called Unravelling the Silk Road, and it explores the history of the country, the medical history of the country and the environmental challenges, and also looks at those environmental challenges and medical history of the UK as well, and looking at our kind of shared connections with this. But what's particularly interesting about Uzbekistan is that the huge, almost monumental figure of Avicenna, who wrote the Canon of Medicine in 1025, which was taught in European medical schools right up until the 17th century. It was a central framework of medicine with laying out humoral medicine and discussions around that. He was from Uzbekistan. He was born in Bukhara, and his ideas still today resonate down the ages here. And so a big part of my project was reading and referencing Avicenna's work and thinking about, in particular, his second book, his book 2, the Materia Medica, which is his pharmacological text. And what's wonderful about it is if you search through the medicines that he makes from all these different materials are so strange and so beautiful. He worked with roasted silk. We're on the Silk Road here. He worked with pearls. He worked with gold as treatment, all sorts of things like that. And so that's all gone into the inspiration behind the work. This piece is called Healing Bowl, and it was inspired by the online hybrid part of my residency, where I worked with young ecologists who are interested in the ecological situation in Uzbekistan. And through that, I learnt that the earth is very, very salty here. This has got various reasons to do with the Aral Sea, to do with the over-agricultural work here, use of fertilizers, things like that, which may have impacted this. But there's been research that shows that growing indigo plants that make the beautiful blue denim dye, growing those plants here actually reduces the salinity in the soil. So I was thinking as well about some projects that I've done in Europe, which have been focused on making biomaterials from agricultural waste. And then another project, so that project was called Better Factory. And I did another project through the EU Voice project, which was called Greening the Lab. And through Greening the Lab, I worked with a company called Happy Earth, who were producing a kind of compost made from biodigested hospital aprons. So they're literally making soil out of medical waste. So to make this bowl, I used one of my recipes for biomaterials that's available on my website, and I combined that with the compost made from the biodigested hospital aprons and with indigo dye from a natural indigo vat that I set up at home. So it's a very beautiful dark, very almost black, but dark blue. And then on the edge of this, I've applied gold leaf, which to me is kind of a symbol of economics, and all these things, these like the overuse of fertilizer or the what we should do with medical waste. All these things are to do with money and economics, so that's what the gold means. And the whole thing is on a bed of Uzbek salt with these lovely Uzbek salt crystals that I bought in the bazaar just across the street here. Down at the bottom here is more salt and a tiny little fish, which was actually presented to me by one of the young ecologists that I met on the first day that I actually came here in person. And I thought this was a perfect symbol, and interestingly, the exact colour of the bowl that I made. So it's an interesting symbol of like salt and life, preservation, how difficult it might be to grow plants, things like that. It's all kind of wrapped up in this object. So the salt is below and above. These handmade organs are cast from anatomical modelling wax. So the kind of wax that they used to use to make the escorchets, the kind of beautiful wax models of women lying back with their chest cut open. And these are handmade from the casting, from moulds that I made from 3D prints, and also with additional textures that I've applied to them that either could represent bacteria, could represent pearls, could represent growth of some kind. And the 3D models that I created have these textures of pearls and silk that Avicenna talked about in his Materia Medica book 2 as being useful for healing. And to me, pearls are also symbolic of granuloma. In tuberculosis or in other diseases, sometimes the body actually tries to wall off the disease, and so it's very much like how a pearl forms in an oyster as trying to wall off a foreign substance like a grain of sand or something like that, so it walls it off. And in the body we have these things called granulomas where the body walls off disease. In TB, in the lungs, it does this. So I was thinking about that, and so for instance the lungs have this texture of silk patterns. The kidneys actually have textures of shells as well, and these are shells based on the shells that you can find at the Aral Sea. This is the Materia Medica necklace, and in many ways it's the kind of central object that brings together most of the themes in the whole exhibition. So it's taking a lot of ideas from Avicenna, this idea of the treatments that he talks about in his book 2, the Materia Medica. And he talks about using pearls, and he talks about using roasted silk, and lots of other things, and madder root, and all sorts of materials that are fascinating. You can kind of get the PDF of the Materia Medica and search through for interesting and strange materials, and you can find almost anything in there. It's really fascinating. So I took these ideas and I created these 3D models of different organs that are augmented with pearls, augmented with silk, as if they're kind of growing out of them and combined. So they're abstract organs. And there's a tooth, the gut, the lungs, which have this texture of embroidered silk, the brain, the stomach, which is combined with flowers, because he also talks about using flowers and using plants, the heart with pearls, the liver, the bladder, and round this side also we have the kidneys, and the kidneys have shells in them. The shells are the same style as you would find at the Aral Sea, this area of ecological crisis in Uzbekistan, as it has shrunk substantially in relatively recent years. It's now expanding again, and it's kind of considered to be an innovation centre now, where they're studying environmental impact and what can be done about it. So we're thinking again about the push and the pull of the past and the future, and innovation, and how we used to think about things, and these combinations of ecology. Avicenna talks about using pearls as a treatment, and to me these represent granulomas in tuberculosis as well, the way the body walls off disease. And I've also created these beads here based on using biomaterials, using my own recipes for biomaterials, but in this case I've used madder root and indigo from an indigo vat, natural indigo vat that I've made to dye these beads as incorporated in the biomaterial. And this is also made with indigo. I've dyed this myself with indigo and with madder root, and the indigo dye and the madder root, the silk is all Uzbek silk that I actually previously bought on a previous visit to Uzbekistan when I came for the first time in 2019 to exhibit and give a talk for Médecins Sans Frontières. So these are tissue culture bottles that I had in my studio that I brought with me. I've applied to them this text that says Materia Medica. I have a strange collection of old medical books that I cut up and repurpose and give a new life to instead of being thrown away. And I cut off the heading from this book that I had, also called Materia Medica, which simply means medical materials. It's a pharmacopoeia. And I applied them here to these bottles. Inside the bottles, I've put 3D printed bacteria and cells in liquids containing local antimicrobial herbs, spices, plant materials that I've bought in the bazaar that's just across the street from the Museum of Contemporary Art of Uzbekistan in Urgench. And I've got, I think this is paprika, this is turmeric, this is safflower, and this is green tea, the most popular drink in Uzbekistan, which has already got an interesting biological element growing in it. It's only been here a few days. And these will maybe form different ecosystems. These are little closed ecosystems that will grow over time. It's not very easy or sensible to try and ship biomaterials internationally into Central Asia from the UK. So I came up with methods for doing this and bringing simple ways of bringing BioArt into the gallery here and starting to have a conversation with local artists, local medical students about BioArt and art that communicates issues in medicine. And that's what we've started here by doing the exhibition. And there's a pumpkin under the base of this plinth. And here pumpkins are used to carry water. But this pumpkin has not been opened up and made into a water carrier yet. So it's actually empty and dry. So there's symbolism there to do with water and the ecosystem and the shrinking of the Aral Sea that happened previously, which is now being remediated. So this is an apothecary, a set of different pharmacological remedies, plants that are used in healing and in healthcare and in traditional medicine, as well as some indigo, which is used, has been used in Uzbekistan to remove the salinity from the soil. The soil here has a very high salt content, so the salt crystal here is representing that as well. We've got gum arabic, which Avicenna, the famous pioneering doctor who was born in Uzbekistan, born in Bukhara, used a lot to make his kind of pastes and different tablets. We've got turmeric, safflower, and other spices and things that they sold to me in the bazaar just behind the museum that are traditionally used for healing or thought to be healing. These works are gelatin prints using acrylic and hand drawing. So I took photographs of the organs that I created using the 3D models and then made kind of stencil-like forms from them, which I then laser printed onto a gelatin plate and then used acrylic paints to colour it and pull the print, and then I used some hand drawing on each work. So for instance, you can see the central element here in the gut is reminiscent of the pearls and the richly decorated silk from Uzbekistan that Avicenna references as treatments in his Materia Medica book. So you can see on the stomach and on the kidneys here, and you can see the shells that he also talks about as a treatment, and the heart, brain, lungs with images of silk embroidery, and so on. So these works are called morbid anatomy, which is kind of quite a strange term, but it means sick bodies, I guess, sick body parts. And it's from 3 different medical textbooks that I've repurposed the pages. They were just being thrown out, so I've saved them and given them a new life, and used these beautiful diagrams and strange texts to kind of go deeper and highlight them with the different. These are also gelatin prints, like other works in the show. So they're made using laser prints onto gelatin and pulled using acrylic paint. And some have got additional hand drawing on them. In a way, this isn't an artwork, even though it's part of the Materia Medica exhibition here at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Uzbekistan. It's an intervention. It's a leaflet from my own personal collection. I have a collection of medical leaflets and things, and I just thought that the phrase on the front of this leaflet, "What about climate?" question mark, question mark, question mark, east, west, north, south, showing deserts and mountains, which we have around here in Uzbekistan, is very relevant. And actually in each one you see there's a patient in a bed, and it's actually a tuberculosis leaflet about how climate can be helpful to good climate can be helpful to treat patients with TB, and if they have rest and things like that, especially in the old way of thinking. Nowadays we can treat them, if available, with antibiotics, and in the UK every patient who has tuberculosis, their bacterial infection gets whole genome sequenced and compared to other DNA sequences of other tuberculosis, and they can have the exactly right targeted antibiotics. But in other parts of the world, it's more difficult. In the UK, we still do have tuberculosis stigma. People do find that, someone has TB, they are treated, they are othered. In other parts of the world, in Central Asia, that can be a bigger problem, because the rates of TB are substantially higher, and it can mean that maybe people don't want to marry them, they might not have the life that they would have hoped to have. So we were thinking about that, and we were thinking about climate change and talking with the young ecologist group that I met as part of my residency, and so I decided to include this leaflet in the exhibition as a kind of echo to all those conversations. This piece is called Tracings, and again I'm using the same imagery that I created for the gelatin prints in the exhibition, and I took stencils based on the photographs of the 3D models that I created and basically traced over them using a 3D printing pen to draw over basically a laser print, and then I washed off the laser print in hot water, and because of the heat from the 3D printing pen, some of the image becomes incorporated in the 3D printed material. So you can see these, they have quite a delicate texture of the print that they were drawn over, still incorporated in these traced, hand-drawn, using 3D printing PLA filament onto these images, and then they were stitched onto handmade paper for the exhibition. When we arrived in Genç at the start of the residency, the flight was very bumpy because there was a great big storm, and it was very, very rainy just for the first day. And it's a very old building here. It's the old post office of Genç, and which is now the Uzbekistan Contemporary Art Museum, and it's going to be refurbished, but it hasn't been refurbished yet. So these areas, which were already painted blue in the gallery, had got these huge stains on them, on the walls, which, you know, the crumbling paint, the pigments coming through, and potentially there may be some molds there growing. And I decided that actually they actually reminded me a lot of some of my earlier paintings. So I originally trained in fine art painting, and I was very much into creating these paintings that look like they kind of just emerged naturally rather than actually being hand painted, although they took sometimes years to paint with a lot of delicate dry brushing. And these reminded me of that, and I actually found the stains on the walls very beautiful. And so I decided to highlight those stains by using gold leaf again, as I did in the healing bowl that's part of the exhibition, and highlight and create interventions on the walls using gold leaf. And it's like a kind of renewal and highlighting the beauty of this intervention of nature into the gallery. And with climate change, we might see more molds growing, because if the weather gets hotter and it gets warmer and wetter, this is ideal circumstances for molds to grow. And some molds produce these mycotoxins, kind of poisons that affect agricultural crops such as peanuts or maize and things like that, and can make people ill slowly over time. So I was also thinking about that, but highlighting this and highlighting the beauty of the water, the way that nature reclaims spaces, given half the chance as well. And that's all very important to me. And the colours, these blues and these golds, I've worked with them a lot in for instance, my project, Mutability of Memories and Fates, which is to do with stem cells. And in that, I was thinking a lot about immortality and spare parts. And actually in ancient Egypt, these are the colours that they used to talk about immortality. So this idea of immortality is very kind of important, but also the decay. So those things are all muddled up together in the way I was thinking when I created this and decided to do this intervention in the gallery, quite a large scale intervention in the gallery. And these plants that are all around are called istvan in Uzbek, but they're called, as I understand it, ephedra in English, or ma huang in Chinese medicine. And they're very traditional to have here in Uzbekistan. People have them in their homes all the time, these plants. You can buy vast quantities of it in the market. People burn bunches of it to purify the space. And in ancient Zoroastrian texts, it's also referred to as a symbol of immortality. So this plant is a symbol of immortality as well. And it's surrounding the central panel of these three wall drawings, splaying out in a way reminiscent of my plague dress and the way I've put the lavender down for the plague dress. And yesterday when we came in, there were some visitors in the gallery, and they spotted a kind of, let's say, beetle. sitting right there on the ephedra, and we looked it up because we wondered maybe it was something like a kind of scarab beetle, a beetle that's like a symbol of renewal, but it was an Egyptian desert cockroach. It turned out, a female one, a very round female, fat cockroach, and we realised that it's actually in ancient Egypt, it was a symbol of contagion and contamination. And I think in a way this idea of immortality, contamination, contagion, nature reclaiming the space, it's all inherent in the work, and it seemed quite prescient that this little creature, which has since been evicted from its home in the ephedra, it kind of symbolised to me this thing. These pieces are AI, generative AI, using these ideas of bacteria, pearls, gold, and things combining. And it's kind of an interesting way of developing ideas, but also a way of thinking about thinking about the future of medicine and where things might be going, and to make a nod towards that. So there's lots of pearls strewn across the case with these digitally generated works. I did about 50 works and selected these 9, which are based on bacteria and pearls, and in this case this one particularly highlights the use of silk as well. All things that are mentioned by Avicenna in his Materia Medica, book 2, as possible treatments for disease. So it's going from the very ancient beginning of medicine to the idea of, like, we're actually collaborating at the moment with scientists in the UK who are using AI to develop an infection prevention system. So in my next show, I'll be showing works from that, which are generated using AI to create an expanded data set for John Snow's Broad Street Pump cholera outbreak, to see if their AI system can prevent the outbreak before it started, hypothetically. And so I am really interested in the uses of AI and generative AI, and people may know that from 2004 I was artist in residence in the Centre for Computational Neuroscience and Robotics at Sussex University, which is one of the largest life research groups in the world, or it was at the time, and since 2010 I've been artist in residence at the University of Hertfordshire in the Department of Computer Science. So I'm very interested in the developments of AI, but not just using it as a tool, but really understanding it, using neural networks in artworks and things like that, which I've been doing since 2004 onwards, really. This piece is called, is the results of a workshop that I ran here, artist masterclass that I ran here, with artists, with students in innovation in ecology, and other artists that came. And it's based on my project Ex Voto, which is a very large installation where people make kind of these little votive offering pieces, a bit like the ones that you would see in a Greek church, for example, that tell the story of their experience of infectious disease or taking antibiotics or something like that. And it's quite a large installation with probably about 1,000 different votives that hang down, that are made by different people, and they're all hung on ribbons, and these ribbons are dyed with indigo, madder root, turmeric, and also with bacteria from my body, with Streptomyces coelocolour bacteria, with bacteria that I've genetically modified using CRISPR, all sorts of things like that. So they tell lots of different stories. So I did a workshop here and showed that work and explained it, and we developed some little votives here which we hung on these ribbons. What was interesting is some of it was lost in translation about the use of antibiotics and the disease, but a lot of people made things that they hoped for and wanted. So they're more about kind of economic hopes in many cases, or this one's a wedding. Somebody made one for their wife who has a heart condition, so that was a hope there. There's quite a lot of crescent moons referencing the Muslim religion here. Somebody hoping that their child would graduate their university course. Somebody wanted a new computer. I think somebody wanted an iPhone. Somebody wanted a wedding. Somebody wanted a family home. Somebody had toothache. They were quite young, so that was a bit worrying. But they wanted a dentist, I think, and they wanted a camera. And so they started to make things that were like a car. There was quite a few BMW symbols as well. So it was interesting that it came to be this more economic thing. But I think that's quite interesting for the piece. And then I would add these to the wider ex voto installation in due course if I can.
Добрый день, дорогие друзья! Мы с вами находимся в Музее современного искусства Узбекистана в городе Ургенч на выставке «Материя Медика» Анны Димитру. Художница работает в направлении биоарта, она из Великобритании. Я хочу поделиться сегодня тем, что наконец-то эта выставка спустя почти год подготовки, она состоялась. Эта выставка вбирает в себя арт-объекты, сделанные из локальных биоматериалов, что очень интересно, и это своего рода новшество для наших мест. Также здесь были проведены несколько мастер-классов, проведены встречи с художниками местными, налажены какие-то, обменены идеями, налажены контакты. BioArt выставка, я считаю, что почему мы долго ждали и мы захотели, чтобы эта выставка состоялась у нас. Первое – это нужность, это необходимость этой выставки, потому что сегодня медицина, она так же, как и много лет назад, она, во-первых, эта выставка основана на изучении книги Абу Али ибн Сино «Авиценны», каноны врачебной медицины. И желание художника из Британии Анны Димитру сделать эту выставку на родине Авиценны, это логическое, нормальное, прекрасное желание, которое мы, также любя и современное искусство, и биоарт, и, конечно, Авиценну, мы захотели с ней отпраздновать этот праздник вместе. Я очень рада, что все получилось. Гостей было очень много, вы это увидите во всех видеороликах, где много было съемок. Много приходило, мы приглашали также и экологов на эту выставку, потому что много местных биоматериалов, естественно, это растительные элементы, это природные какие-то камни, соли, это переработанные отходы. Это сегодняшняя очень актуальная тема, и в Узбекистане тоже. Например, в прошлом году был год экологии, и все это было актуально, но экология, она всегда актуальна, и редко, когда тема исчерпывается, она должна так все время поддерживать и говорить о себе. Поэтому эта выставка, она настолько актуальна, и здесь подчеркнуты были немножко забытые рецепты восточной медицины. Это приятно, что где-то далеко в Англии изучают методы народной медицины, восточной медицины древнего Востока, Узбекистана, скажем так, да. Я бы хотела, чтобы было очень красивое логическое продолжение этой британской истории. Также хочу сказать, что несколько экспонатов мы берем в постоянное хранение в Музее современного искусства сюда, в Ургенч. Это прекрасно. Спасибо Анне большое. И я жду уже теперь моих друзей из Британии снова в нашей локации. Вот, это был очень увлекательный проект Materia Medica. Прошу вас поддерживать очень такие интересные проекты. И наши двери всегда открыты для того, чтобы создать очередной праздник. И спасибо большое.